Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to answer questions on A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Let's begin by these questions on page number 117. MCQ questions, page number 117. Number 1. On what day did Molly die 7 years ago? Of course, remember that Molly is the partner of Mr. Scrooge. On what day did Molly die 7 years ago? Is it on a Christmas Day, on New Year's Eve, on Christmas Eve, on a Sunday night? Yes, that's right. The answer is C. He died on a Christmas Eve 7 years before. Number 2. Before leaving the office, Bob's last task was to turn off the air conditioner, sweep the floor, fill in his timesheet, or snuff out the candle. Of course, it is D, snuff out the candle, to extinguish the candle as ordered by Mr. Scrooge, because, he was so stingy. Number 3, both Scrooge and his suit of rooms were, both of them, the same description applies to Scrooge and his abode, his house. Both of them were old, dreary, and chilly, or smart, stylish, and new, smelly and filthy, or the final choice, warm and inviting. Yes, of course, it is A. All of these apply to both, Scrooge and his house. A, old, dreary, and chilly, cold. 4. What did Molly regret most about his life? A, that he hadn't earned enough money, that Scrooge had been his partner, that he had been blind to the needs of others, or that he hadn't taken better vacations. Of course, the most thing regrettable to Molly is that C, he had been blind to the needs of others. C. 5. How was Scrooge's nephew like Fan, his mother? Of course, his nephew is called Fred. How is Fred like Fan, his mother? A. Both lived to a ripe old age. B. Both were interested in Scrooge's money. C. Both were abused by Scrooge. D. Both were kind and loving to Scrooge. Of course, the correct answer is D. Both were kind and loving to Scrooge. Throughout the story, the Cratchits symbolize the Cratchits, this poor family of Bob Cratchit. A. Families who live well in spite of hardships. B. People who are too lazy to get better jobs. C. People with little hope or confidence. D. Sad families who pretend to be happy. Yeah, sure, it is A. Families who live well in spite of hardships or agonies. 7. What sad event would happen if the future didn't change? A. Bob Cratchit would lose his job. B. Christmas would be cancelled. C. Tiny Tim, the son of Bob Cratchit, Tiny Tim would soon die. D. Scrooge would become young again. Of course, the correct answer is C. Tiny Tim would soon die. Let's move to page number 118 and another type of questions. Answer each question in your own words, with reference, of course, to the text. We will answer the questions and then move back to the text for reference. Number 1. The author uses temperature to set the mood of the story. The mood of the story is reflected in the temperature described by Charles Dickens. Explain how the weather and one of the characters are described in terms of temperature, and this description applies to both this character and the weather surrounding this place, London. We can say that the weather outdoors was foggy from fog, cold, and getting even colder. Scrooge himself is described as a cold man, both inside from within and outside. Let's move to page number 23 to refer to this from the text, page number 23. You will find a reference to that on page number 23 when the writer, Charles Dickens, says, of course, Scrooge is the character speaking right now, almost at the bottom section of the page. I wish to be left alone. Look how cold is Scrooge. I wish to be left alone, says Scrooge, since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen. At this moment, he is talking to the two gentlemen who had just come to ask him for charity on behalf of the poor. I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas. He doesn't feel happy when Christmas comes, and I can't afford to make idle people merry, lazy people merry. They don't deserve that. He is so cold, so mean, so stingy. I help to support the establishments. Of course, remember that we discussed that before. The establishments are prisons and workhouses. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough. And those who are badly off, poor people, must go there, must go to prisons or workhouses instead of asking for charity. Then he goes on to continue. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. They answer him, many can't go there, and many would rather die. But he replies, if they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it, to die, and decrease the surplus population. Look how mean he is. He is so mean, so stingy, that he prefers not to give charity to these two old gentlemen, so that the poor may be living wealthful life. and he prefers that they go to prisons and workhouses instead. Then on page number 24, here the writer, Charles Dickens, links the description of this stingy man, Scrooge, to the description of the place in which he lives. Okay, when he says on page number 24, meanwhile, on most of the top section of the page, meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened, increased. Usually writers do that. Okay, when there's a certain description of a character and he wants to attach or to increase or to boost this kind of description, it is immediately followed by the description of a similar object, okay, regarding certain features. Meanwhile, he says, the fog and darkness thickened, so increased. The people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses in carriages and conduct them on the way. Let's back to page number 118, question number 2. Why does Scrooge think that Christmas is ridiculous? And to use his own word, he said, humbug, ridiculous, nonsense. Explain at least 2 of his reasons, as mentioned by Scrooge. A suitable answer for that question would be that Scrooge says that people are foolish to spend money at Christmas. Poor people should go to prison. It's another reason. Poor people should go to prison. A third one would be when you say that it is not his own business. Okay. You'll find the linkage to that on page number 20. Page number 20. The first section of the page at the top, the second line from the top, the middle of the line. What's Christmas time to you? But, of course, at that moment he is talking to his nephew Fred when he comes to his uncle, asking him to join them at Christmas Eve. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? So what are these bills being paid without money? He means charity, paying money to the poor, benevolence, to pay for something and don't get what you paid for. A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books. Of course, you know that he is an accountant. Balancing your books means accountant books, and having every item them through around dozen months presented dead against you. If I could work my will, said Scrooge indignantly or angrily. Every idiot, so describes those who celebrate Christmas as being idiot. Okay, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding. Okay, with his own pudding, his dessert, the dessert people make on Christmas Eve, should be dead, he says, and buried with a stake of holly. A stake of this plant, holly. It's a kind of plant with berries. Through his heart, he should. People who go about celebrating Christmas must die. Let's move back to question number 3 on page number 118. Question number 3, right? Explain how Mali forged his own chain, link by link and yard by yard. Well, Mali's repeated acts of greed and selfishness are links in this iron chain that shall encircle his waist forever. The chain that is being encircled around his waist, okay, which shall be eternal. You'll find the linkage to that on page number 33. Right, at the middle or the bottom section of the page, on page number 33. I wear the chain I forged in my life. I made to myself while alive, replied the ghost. Of course, this is the ghost of Mali. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it. I fastened or surrounded it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Then on page number 35, he goes on to complete the description of this chain when he says, business, the middle section of the page number 35, business, wringing its hands again, twisting and squeezing his hands. Mankind was my business. Of course, as I told you before that, here we have a kind of irony or sarcasm, because all of the subsequent descriptions he's going to tell you are not real. These descriptions are unreal. He didn't do that. Mankind was my business. It wasn't. Indeed, it wasn't. The common welfare was my business. It wasn't. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Indeed, they were not. He is mocking himself. The dealings of my trade, on the other hand, were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. That was his real business. Then it held up its chain. The ghost of Mali held it up, the chain, at arm's length, as if it were the cause of all its unavailing grief, unsuccessful grief. It is no use grieving now. And flung it heavily upon the ground once again. And then he says, at this time of the rolling year, the spectre said, I suffer most at Christmas, because it is the time when benevolence and charity and mercy should be mostly displayed. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down of shame, of course, and never raised them to that blessed star which led the wise man to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Question number 4 on page number 118. Which spirit carried something in his hand? What was uncommon about this common object? Of course, it is the spirit or the ghost of the Christmas present. It carried a torch that could sprinkle good cheer, distribute good cheer on people. You will find something about that on page number 66, about the torch. On page number 66, the bottom section of the first paragraph, the bottom section, the final section of the first paragraph on this page, you will find, and it was a very uncommon kind of torch. Why? For once or twice, when there were angry words, a quarrel or a fight between people with words, between some dinner carriers, because people were going about here and there carrying food, who had jostled each other, pushed each other, he shed a few drops, sprinkled a few drops of water on them from his torch, from it, and the good humor was restored directly once these droplets were sprinkled upon those people. As for question number 5 on the same page, 118, question number 5, describe 2 of Scrooge's good deeds at the end of the story. Indeed, there were many good descriptions as mentioned by Charles Dickens at the end of this story, but it's enough to mention only 2. For example, he bought a turkey for Bob Cratchit, his poor clerk, donated money to the poor, and gave Bob a raise. All of this and more you can find on pages from 109 to 115. Let's move to 109. On page number 109, for example, we find the first type of change, the first glimpse, the first sign of change in Scrooge's character. 109, the middle section of the page, or the bottom section of the page. No, said Scrooge, I am in earnest. At this moment, he asks a boy who was just going by his window outside, he asks him to buy a turkey. He says, I am in earnest, I'm serious. Go and buy it. Go and buy the biggest turkey in the poultry shop, and tell them to bring it here to me, that I may give them the direction where to take it as a delivery. Come back with the man, and I'll give you, this small boy, I'll give you a shilling as a recompensation or as a reward. I'll give you a shilling. So, number 1, he buys a turkey, or he's going to buy a turkey. 2, he will give the boy a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown, even more. Then, a couple of lines later, I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He declares his intention of buying this turkey, that he is going to send that to Bob Cratchit's. Okay, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim, his son. Shall be a good surprise. Then on page number 110, at the middle of the page, when he says, why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. He's talking to the man who comes with the big turkey. Okay, and he says, you must have a cab. He must take a transportation. He mustn't walk. The chuckle with which he said this, the rapidity, the hastiness, the chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, okay, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, gave him a shilling or even a half a crown, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down. After that, he sat down, breathless, in the chair again, and chuckled till he cried. The third sign or glimpse of a change in his character immediately follows when he says, when Charles Dickens says, shaving wasn't an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much. Shaving here is a sign of happiness. He prepared for something or to enjoy something very happy, in which you will feel happiness, which is Christmas. Okay, it's a sign of happiness, a sign of a change in the psychology, in the way he thinks. Scrooge, of course. And then the following paragraph, beginning with, he dressed himself all in his best clothes, of course. He dressed and walked in the streets happily, and at last got out into the streets. It's a sign of change as well. He didn't used to do that in the past. He didn't enjoy Christmas. He didn't rejoice with the people outside. On page number 111, the following page, the opposite one, we'll find another sign of change in his character. When he meets one of the two old gentlemen who came to him in stave number 1, as I remember, asking for charity for the poor, he met one of them accidentally while celebrating with the people outside. When he says, yes, the middle section of the page, yes, said Scrooge, that is my name. Of course, this man is so astonished at his newly changed behavior. That is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness? Here Scrooge whispered in his ear, will you have the goodness, of course, to do something, but it is not mentioned so far. Lord, bless me, the man cannot understand how can Scrooge ask for such a thing. Okay? He is so surprised. Lord, bless me, cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious about that? He can't imagine that is being that's happening already. If you please, says Scrooge, not a farthing less. It means I am so serious about that. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor? Will you give that for the organization organizing or giving poor people money or charity? Then another, maybe a fifth sign of a change in his character, on page number 112, number 5 of the signs of change in his character. The first paragraph in this page, the writer says, he went to church. Scrooge never went in the past to church. He never did that. He never liked to gather with people. He always isolated himself. He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro and patted children on the head. He patted children on the head and questioned beggars, exchanged speech with beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows and found that everything could yield him pleasure. These scenes which gave him disgust upon seeing it in the street, now giving him pleasure. He had never dreamt that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. This is number 6 of the signs of change in him. Okay, he went to his nephew's house, to Fred's house, to celebrate and share a feast with his nephew. On page number 113, you'll find maybe sign number 7, okay, at the bottom of the page, when he says, "I am very sorry," said Bob. Here we find a final scene indeed, in this novella, in which next day, after celebrating Christmas the previous day, next day they go to work. Scrooge comes first to the shop, and Bob is a little bit late, almost a quarter of an hour. The clock struck 9 and then a quarter passed. When Bob comes in, he begins apologizing for Mr. Scrooge when he says, and I quote, "I am very sorry, sir," said Bob, "I am behind my time." "You are," repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob. "Please, it's only once a year," appearing from the tank, from his place of work. "It shouldn't be repeated. I'll never repeat that again. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." But to your surprise, as well as to Bob's, at the bottom line, the final 3 words of the page, at the bottom of the page, the final 3 words. And therefore, of course, at this moment, Bob is expecting that he will be dismissed from his job, or something bad that might happen, a decrease in his salary or something like that. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary. This is sign number 8, maybe. He's going to give him a raise, a bonus. Bob can't understand the change that has befallen Scrooge. This is felt from his from Charles Dickens' description, when he says, "Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler." There was a ruler next to him. He had a momentary idea. He thought about, for just a moment, he thought about knocking Scrooge down with that ruler, holding him and calling to the people in the court for help and the straight waistcoat. You know, this straight waistcoat, is used to limit the movement of mad people when the authorities go to put them in medical custody, or move them to a hospital for mentally disturbed or mentally diseased people. Okay, I mean that he turned mad. Of course, Molly can't understand how much a change has befallen Scrooge. Not only this, "A Merry Christmas, Bob," says Scrooge, with an seriousness that couldn't be mistaken, as he clapped him on his back. "A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary, but not only this, not only a raise, and endeavor to assist your struggling family as well." So, sign number 8 maybe, okay, that he is going, or he decides to assist his struggling family. But how did he help the family? How did he intend to assist his struggling family? You'll find an answer to this on page number 115, when he says, "Scrooge was better than his word. He did even more. He did it all, what he mentioned or what he promised his clerk, Bob, of doing. He just did, and even more, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who didn't die, of course, to the relief of Scrooge, because he loved that boy, that crippled boy. He didn't die, as was foretold by the ghost of Christmas yet to come. He was his second father. To this Tiny Tim, Scrooge was his second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, both, and even a third, okay, and as good a man. That is what is most important, as good a man, as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Thank you, and next time, inshallah, we are going to present more questions on a Christmas Carol, and having answers to them. Thank you.